Hello and welcome to the Life After Diets podcast. I'm Sarah Dosanjh, psychotherapist and author of the book, I Can't Stop Eating.
And I'm Stephanie Michelle, binge recovery health coach. If you feel out of control around food, we get it because we've been there.
Thank you for joining our conversations about how to make peace with food and feel more comfortable in our bodies.
Now on to this week's episode. Today's our live episode, in case you couldn't tell. We recruited suggestions yesterday, and one of the first ones that popped up is the one we're going with, which is jealousy and comparison.
Yes. So, Steph, I've just got back from the beach. Are you jealous?
Yes. Oh, but no, I'm envious.
That's where I was going to start.
Oh.
We have to talk about the difference between the two, otherwise, even though I'm pretty sure I'll just get them mixed up and probably use them interchangeably, but there is technically a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, one's much harder to deal with, in my opinion.
Which one? Envy
Jealousy.
or jealousy? Well, jealousy. Is
oh no, sorry, envy. See, I'm switching them too.
Yeah. Well, envy means discontented longing for someone else's advantages. I want to add in there, or perceived advantages. And jealousy means unpleasant suspicion or apprehension of rivalship. So does it bring up a rivalry between us to hear that I was at the beach?
Right,
it could.
Right. It doesn't. And jealousy is the one I'm much more uncomfortable with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jealousy feels personal. Like it feels like it's about my shortcoming versus envy, which to me feels more like I just want something that you have, but it's not really about me. That's how I think about it. I don't know if that's the actual definition.
No, I think they're both really hard, to be honest. As I'm thinking them, I'm like, I don't know which one's my favorite. Well, before we start, I kind of just want to mention this because before we started recording, I said to Steph, actually, like we're doing this episode live, and I find this one's quite a vulnerable topic to talk about because there's something that can be really unpleasant about these emotions, and there would be some judgment for me as well when they come up. So doing it, self-judgment. Well,
do you
maybe
judge others?
not just no, but someone you might be judged for being envious or jealous.
Yeah.
So it's kind of from all angles, and so doing it live is much harder.
Put ourselves in a predicament.
Exactly. Yeah. At least when it's just me and Steph, we're like, oh, whoops, we don't like that. We'll cut that out.
I'm not ready to say that to the world.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I'll go first because jealousy is an emotion that I have dealt with that like I used to go to therapy for it because it bothered me so much with specific people. But I have found a lot of freedom in acknowledging that that's actually what's going on. I don't know. It's just a very uncomfortable emotion, but I've since been taking on just naming it and saying like, I'm feeling jealous and kind of being like, yeah, of course I am in this situation or that situation and making sense of it as I like to do. And yeah, I think just naming it sometimes has been like, oh, that's what I'm dealing with. Yeah, that's what I'm dealing with. Trying to work my way around it and name it something else. And, and it's like, no, that's just what this is. And it's uncomfortable. And therefore, okay, knowing what it is, I can work with it.
I think because I would always say, if you'd asked me this question, I don't know, 10 years ago, when I'd probably done a lot less looking at myself, I would have just said, I'm not a jealous person. I'm not a jealous person. And I would have believed it. Like it wouldn't have been like me trying to convince anybody of anything. I feel jealousy, but I can't really remember, not till way back when, of jealousy taking me over. Because there's a whole jealousy can kind of take you over, and it has such a story to it as well.
Yes.
And I remember years ago, probably like 2013, maybe, Brooke Castillo did a podcast episode on jealousy. And she said that, and now I know this is rationalization, and this doesn't mean it gets rid of jealousy, but I have found it really helpful. She said that seeing something that someone else has or that you want doesn't mean like that you then can't have it because they got it instead of you. Because that's how it used to feel to me. It's like, why does that person get that thing? Again, like I feel like I'm talking a bit more about envy now, when that should be mine, or that. Where am I going with this?
Well, like it's like one person gets it in fairness. There's like a justice to that.
Yeah, that it meant somehow scarcity, because I think where jealousy came up for me before was more around achievement, what people had achieved.
Mm.
And Brooke Castillo did this whole reframe around that someone else's achievement isn't like a lack of your own.
Right.
And so whilst then when I would notice jealousy coming up, I would kind of do this rationalization with it like that. But this was around kind of success and achievement, which is, I guess, when we're talking about the kind of content we talk about on our podcast, it's going to be bodies that we're talking about, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, but translatable because my jealousies, I've had fierce jealousy. I will admit that I have been someone who jealousy has taken over. Um, and it has always been about bodies and body size. However, in more recent years, that's and also there's a direct line to comparison in this, right? Like when the jealousy comes from a comparison. Working on this over the past 4 or 5 years, it's settled a bit. However, I'm like, "Oh, but now it's over here." Like, she's gone over there.
Dang it.
But I've done a lot of work on that particular idea of the competitive roots of it and the scarcity roots of it. I also been really associating that with upbringing and having siblings and the way that especially same gender siblings can incite this and where that like there's a lot of origins for me there. And the way that I was parented and the comparison set up about us as kids, and like she does this, you don't do that, that as an origin story of that, but recognizing more and more that one person may have something and that doesn't mean you don't, or that you don't have something too. Like it's not an either or situation. And we talked about this in the 100th episode when we were talking about the difference of our opinions and things. And I think that my comparison work has helped our dynamic and relationship because naturally there could be a competitive element between us, right? It could be there, but it feels more like your wins and my win. It just feels a lot more celebratory. Which is not to say that there's not times where that might peak in, but I think having done a lot of intentional work around it is necessary, like to reframe what it means to compare yourself to someone else, and also the links it has to your own self-esteem and your own sense of worth. Those are all intersected with the susceptibility to comparison and jealousy.
Yeah. How does jealousy feel in your body? For me, when I'm thinking about jealousy, like I'm thinking of it as like a sting, but when I'm
Mm,
going back, because I'm thinking back to like real body comparisons. So I'm thinking back to when I was writing my eating disorder, and I remember going on this weekend away with a friend of mine and a couple of her friends. And these women were just like beautiful, socially, culturally stunning. And I remember it didn't feel like jealousy, it just felt like complete intimidation.
mm.
So I'm wondering whether jealousy can because jealousy, there's a comparison element to that. Or maybe this is envy again. No. Um,
Interchangeable
do you think it's always that sort of stingy, got that fierceness in it, or is it ever anything
for
else?
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for me, the jealousy is it's a of like it's it's very like I'm like, oh, I feel jealous, like it's a flood. Um, then what might come after that is some kind of insecurity or I'm not good enough. And that's different. That becomes like I don't know what you'd name it, but it's like that feels more like there's a different feeling of that. But the jealousy to me is a rush. And intimidation's a bit different, but they often pair, but I see them as distinct. I definitely know intimidation too, and then that to me feels like my, I feel like I have a facade on, and I'm feeling all this action behind the facade. But jealousy to me feels like ooh, it like comes up and I feel like I can't hide it. It breaks through a facade. It's very like hot, um, in my face and in my head and in my chest, like upper body, where a lot of emotions exist. But it almost jealousy to me feels almost actionable. Like when it rises, it feels like I'm actively compromised. Like I'm actively in danger or like need to do something to either get out of here, to stop it, or to compete with it.
For me, I think where the jealousy calms down, like it comes as sort of maybe a pang, slightly stingy pang. It calms down if I remember to fill in the gap. So once I heard somebody say that if you're jealous of someone, imagine then that for you to have what they have, you have to take everything, their whole life, all of it.
Yeah.
And that has been enormously helpful for me. Like when I see your beautiful house, I'm like, yeah, but you'd have to take 3 kids and the responsibility of that as well. I'm like, okay, I'm good being homeless. That's all right.
That's true. And absolutely, I think that's an excellent tool to use and to remember. I'm going to apply that to bodies as well. So there's one person, maybe 2. There's probably more than that, but actively there's about 2 people in my life that still will inspire some kind of body comparison, jealousy. Which I think is pretty good. It used to be everybody in the world, but now it's like these specific people. And there's something about, I think I might have spoken about this. One of them has the opposite life to me. She's more actually your life, doesn't have children. She she just like travels around, like does things, and isn't attached to any, like she's got a lot of freedom. And I envy that freedom. And I think that's part of the jealousy factor, right? So she has time to like, I don't know. She does all these fun things like the tough mutters, and she just does fun activities with her body. You know what I mean? So she's strong and she's got all this. And I'm like, well, here I am talking about like I would have to take on the rest of her life. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it might not work with everybody, Steph. That should come with a disclaimer. No, but Steph, that would mean giving up your kids.
I know.
Like, look at those 3 people.
I know.
Giving up
the day you talk to me.
Yeah.
No, I know. It also involves, because I know this person to be, right, the flip side of that freedom is a lot of instability. And that's one of my top values. Stability is super important for me. And there's a lot of instability in that lifestyle and a lot of chasing. There's some kind of almost obsession with the body on her part that also was like, okay, well, there's more, like I've been there and I would have to take that on too. And just to consider like all the elements going on here that I don't actually want, that I actually willingly walked away from. But that doesn't mean that there's not like, there's a part of me that is that's what makes it so comfortable for me to say, I don't even need to defend it. It's just that there's a part of me that envies a body that's very easy, that can easily go shopping, that can easily get dressed, that like walks into a room and is automatically like there's some kind of attraction to people like that. And there, of course, there's a bit of like, yes, I'm a little jealous of that. And I can just name that without even having to do all that other, but I wouldn't want her this. Like that feels almost like rationalization sometimes. I'm kind of okay with, I'm a little, of course I'm jealous of someone who has something easier. Of course I'm jealous about that at times. It just isn't the flooding. And I think the flooding part, the part where it becomes this like overtaking thing, that's what I had to look at. It was like, why is it so like, why is that jealousy becoming so big? That needs attention. I feel now that it's at a point where it's like, I'm comfortable with the amount of jealousy that it produces in me. Like it feels reasonable. And I just need to name that's what it is. But it's not becoming that hotness in my head anymore. And that to me is like, okay, that feels very human then. It feels like not that it's not human to have a trigger, but it's kind of getting it to this threshold of where it feels like I can deal with that versus this is really something I need to look at.
Well, I want to qualify as well. The rationalization doesn't eliminate jealousy. It just stops the story and the momentum and the sense of, I just need that thing for everything in my life to be perfect.
Yeah.
Otherwise I still do think if I lived in a house that was like yours, I wouldn't have a problem again. I can't help it. That's just the story.
Do you know what?
Uh-huh.
When I lived, I moved here just under 2 years ago. And when I lived in my old house, I was like, when I get a bigger house and a house that I want, things are going to be better. Hold on a second. I'm going to twist this. A lot of things have. I have to say that like, because how we've talked in the HSP episode about like outer chaos is really triggering to me. And in this house, there's more of a place for my stuff. Everything has a place except for in the kitchen, but like everywhere else, it kind of is organized, and that's helped me. And I feel like there was a part of that was like, nope, I was right. Like, I really did need more space to feel like there was more of a regulation. However, then you're like, oh, but having a little bit of external regulation does not soothe all of my problems the way I thought it might. You know what I mean? So there is still this X factor that isn't getting addressed. But yes, it did calm down my sense of external chaos. And I do appreciate that.
Yeah, and I am laughing at myself because I know the pattern. It's always like, if only I had that, then everything would be
Yeah.
okay. I think people feel like that a lot with the even embarking on something like intuitive eating to go, well, if only I was straight sized to begin with,
Yeah.
then everything would
I
be
could do,
okay.
yeah.
I think it's really confusing and baffling for people in bigger bodies to look at people in smaller bodies and comprehend how their level of distress can be comparable.
Yeah.
Mm.
Uh, uh, definitely. I think it's one of those things where you find that the thing that we think or assume might solve a problem or make things better ends up potentially being it would be a supportive role. It might play a supportive role and it might help make things feel easier sometimes, but it's not going to take that whatever that core issue is away. It's not that, but it might be helpful. Like it might be nice.
It's moving closer to the perfect living your best life and all that.
Yeah. I feel that way in social situations. So I was just prior to coming onto this call or onto this episode, I was at my daughter's kindergarten end of year party. And admittedly, not having the best body image day. And so went to the party. There were about 5 or 6 other moms there. Party was outside. And I was just feeling like I don't like my clothes. Like I just felt uncomfortable. And there's this other mom that I meet who's, she's got the look. And now I'm not, it's not a thing, but there is this part of you that's like, if I looked like that, I would feel more comfortable and then I might be able to have an easier time. And then I'm like, yep, for 5 seconds. And then you would still be like, I don't know these moms. How do I fit in with these moms? It's also the end of the school year. I'm really sad about my daughter not being in kindergarten anymore. Like that stuff, the stuff that's kind of giving me a little like that's rising my system a little bit would still be there. It would just be that I would have one less thing that I would be thinking about, but it wouldn't take away the actual social insecurities or, the even the like small talk kind of like awkwardness, like that stuff would still be there. It's just that you might not also be thinking about your shirt. You know what I mean? Like, and how much does that really amount to at the end of the day? I think it would make it easier, but it wouldn't ultimately change my entire mood. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's triggered off stuff in my head. I'm remembering, I've got a friend who I do feel, I'm gonna say envious or jealous, no, envious of her capacity to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So she came to stay with me for 2 months. Now, bearing in mind, I lived in the area for like a year at this point, and she stays for 2 months and knows this shop owner and this shop owner, and she's got her coffee place over here, and she's connected with it, and she just talks to anybody, anywhere, from the
Yeah.
homeless guy sitting outside Tesco to just anybody else. And the ease at which she does that, um, I can find myself feeling a bit envious of. And it's not even that I'm particularly bad at that. I would just like to be so much better. I'd like to be the kind of person that is just so at ease with talking to everybody and anybody. That's who I want to be, Steph. If I could be that, I'd never have a problem again. Just kidding on that note.
I agree. I think we should shut down the episode. Do you think that there's a part of you that is like that and that's what your jealousy taps into or envy taps into?
I
Like that
think because I experience it as a slight awkwardness or a little bit of fear that stops me from doing that as much as I would want to.
So can I just say something? Because when you came to visit me and you sat down at a table of my family that you'd never met before, and I was hosting too, so I wasn't right by your side the whole time. You sat there and talked and made conversation with everybody. And I mentioned to Mike afterwards, I was like, Sarah could hold her own. Like she doesn't need a babysitter. Like she's comfortable enough to. So you do come across that way. So part of me is wondering, like, is a part of you recognizing that you have a capacity for this? And I think sometimes what we envy is where we think we have potential that maybe we don't perceive we're fulfilling. You know what I mean? Versus like, I don't feel that same heat of jealousy when I'm talking about something I admire about somebody, but that is not even in my lane at all, that I'm not even close to getting near, because then it's like, it's not even, but the closer I am to actually maybe being that thing or having potential to be that thing, the jealousy will peak because then I'm like, I could be that though. I could be that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is a bit of that because I feel like I do have the social skills. I don't know why that sounds so stupid. Sounds weird when I say that. I'm not stupid. I'm not calling myself stupid. But I think actually the question often is in these situations that needs to be felt as true is, am I wanted here? And your family were very good at making me feel welcome. And I said this to you at the time, like they were asking questions to me. Had the conversation been and I had to be the one to initiate, that's what it is. I wish I could initiate
Mm,
conversations better. If someone else initiates a conversation, then yeah, I feel like I can talk to most people.
okay.
If you would like to come and connect with us in person, we're going to be in Dublin on Saturday, the 16th of September 2023. We're going to be teaming up with the Intuitive Eating Hub for a workshop, followed by a social at a local Irish pub. We would love to meet you and hope you can join us.
And don't forget, you can still join our community of listeners by signing up on Patreon for access to monthly support calls, an active private Facebook group, and regular Ask Us Anything bonus calls. Links for Dublin and for the community are in the show notes. Sarah says, I have a children's birthday party to go to on Saturday. And situations like this really fuel the envy I feel towards parents who don't have a child with special needs. He'll be the only child there with special needs, and it feels palpable. The freedom and opportunities they have that we don't. I don't think I will ever get past that. I sympathize with that. I don't have children with special needs, and I can't pretend to understand that level, but I can appreciate why that would be so difficult. And I have a friend who started a group of other moms with children with special needs because I think there's such a need for people that understand what that is and who can resonate with these feelings. You know what I mean? Because I think that if we're feeling guilty about even feeling this way, then there's an added layer of stuff to deal with on top of something that's already hard enough. And there's something in this too. I think it's tied to jealousy and comparison of it, and the element of it's not fair, which we've talked about before, but whenever like that rises, there's something very like it's just not fair. That's just true. You know what I mean? Like again, I think it's coming to terms with this lack of it being fair, and that's hard to deal with because some things aren't, like I think that sucks. I think that feeling really sucks when it's like, it's just not fair though. It's not fair that somebody's got a genetic code that is just easier. It just, and how do we deal with things when they're not fair? When others have privileges, basically that we don't have, not by any fault of one's own, but just because that's what is. Like, how do we deal with that? Sarah,
Yeah.
how?
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you. Well, I'm also thinking of that frustration that in those situations where it feels like somebody else has it so much easier than what you're going through, and that person doesn't even seem to know it.
Mm.
Like, I think there's a sting in that as well. It's like you don't even realize how good you got it.
You jerk.
And I know I can easily go on both sides where I'm completely oblivious on being on the side who's got it easier, and on the flip side as well, feeling that way sometimes
What do
towards other
we
people.
need? Like, what do we need in a moment like that, where it's just not fair? Is it just to sit with that and just, I think partly, right? Like just to say like, it isn't. Yeah, it isn't. And I want to be mad. I want to be, I need a little time to be pissed off about it. I
Mm.
do. I feel
Mm.
like. But then what? What do I need after? What do we need? What do I need to do?
Well, I don't know whether we can necessarily do it, but maybe what we need is to be seen as well
Yeah.
and have that acknowledged. That's why people come together in groups where there's that
Yes.
resonance, because then experience can be validated and understood. It's that hunger for someone to see and go like,
Yeah.
see that, I see what you're going through. I see what you're
Yes.
doing. And I care that it's hard, even if I can't relate, but even better if I can relate, really.
Okay, we're going back to like the power of community for comparison and jealousy. So it even ties in here.
Yeah. So now's the time to join our community, eh? Insert link.
We'll see you.
Yeah, we will see you. That's why we do the Ask Us Anything. So you can ask us stuff and we will see you.
Yeah. Speak to it.
Yeah. I really related to what Laurie's put here when she says that jealousy can have anger in it for me too. I feel lesser than. I think that's the key element.
Yeah.
It's that feeling less for me anyway. It's that feeling
Yes.
inferior in my mind, and that's more likely to happen. When's that more likely to happen? Because I was gonna say that's probably more likely to happen with things like intelligence. I'm like, "No, not necessarily. No, not necessarily that." I guess it could happen with anything.
Well, studies show that the more vulnerable we are to jealousy and like significant amounts of it, it's linked to lower self-esteem,
Mhm,
which what might be predictable. But I vouch for this because I think, when earlier in the episode when I was talking about the heat, like that way I used to flood with jealousy as a chronic thing, um, is not now I experience jealousy, but it's not flooding jealousy. Only sometimes with someone.
mhm,
I'm not ready to name, but like the the rest has improved as my self-esteem has improved, and my self-esteem has improved through recovery. And that includes finding things I'm good at that I respect myself for and that others have seen me for too. So getting some external validation in addition to the internal validation has been really helpful to build self-esteem. And I didn't have any of that before. That was so lacking at the same time the jealousy was so high. So there is this significant link.
mhm.
Could do an episode on how do you address your self-esteem because it's not like you just go fix that. But they
I
are certainly. Yeah, go ahead.
was gonna say we haven't done an episode on low
I
self-esteem, have
I
we?
know, we should, that's what I'm
Mm.
saying.
All right. Good suggestion.
Are you jealous that I came up with it?
Yeah.
Uh,
I thought I did, and you're like, "Yeah, that's what I already said." And I was like, "Dang it, I felt less than."
Lori says by the way, we're live today, everybody. Everybody on the who's listening on the podcast. Um, but Lori says, "The not fairness reminds me of not having the petite dancer's body that I've craved my entire life, and I guess it comes down to acceptance of the realities." Yeah, partially. Yeah, I think partially. I think that's what I feel like stewing in the not fairness allows. It validates the part of it that's like, this is a reality that just is, and I think it's unfair.
Mm.
And I need to be mad. I need time to be mad about it. I think it's part of the grief of accepting a reality, which is part of the anger and, until you get to that acceptance piece. I think there's other techniques obviously that we've touched on that we could that can help. Like again, that petite dancer's body might also come with other, because I've known people who live in small bodies who have really had a hard time with unwanted sexual attention and things like that to the degree of trauma sometimes, and like that there's just different angles of looking at something, but by and large when we're talking about this, I think yeah, it's like we live in a culture where there's certain bodies that are prioritized, that are valued over others, and it's genetic code a lot of the time.
Do you think there's a place for using gratitude as a tool to deal with jealousy, or does that feel a bit toxic positive to you?
I think it's got to be at the right time. Like if you are trying to use gratitude before you've had allowed yourself to be mad or to feel like it's not fair, I think that's when it feels toxic. But I think that's more of a part after you've processed the emotions, the harder emotions around it. That's when it's like, well, now there's nothing left for me to do about this, except I can start looking at what I do have and the things about myself things I'm good at, things that I like about myself. And that would come in at a certain time after I think.
Well, we don't want to use it as a way to invalidate the
Right.
feeling. Like, you don't
Right.
want to
Exactly.
invalidate or suppress or push down. It's kind of allowing that feel. I love the naming of it, and I really, really want people to pair that with the non-judgment. And actually, like rather than non-judgment, I've been thinking about this because how can you just not judge? You can't stop yourself from judging. So non-judgment doesn't really work. The antidote to judgment is
Acceptance, love,
keep going.
neutrality,
You're nearly there.
gratitude.
Compassion.
Oh.
Like if we have compassion for
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah.
feeling, for ourselves, for feeling like we are just human beings having a human experience. And yes, we feel insecure sometimes. And sometimes we see something in other people that triggers off a response in that. If we can just have compassion for that condition that we are all vulnerable to on different degrees, that for me does more help than anything of allowing an emotion to move through so I can come out the other side of it and find my mind again. So I'm not rushing into the mind.
Yeah. I also think in so doing, the goal can't be to get rid of the jealousy. The jealousy will arise the same way anger comes back, sadness comes back. All the emotions You don't process them so they never come back. It's just really for that minute that you're trying to get through. But jealousy will return again. I think that I used to have an idea that if I processed my jealousy, I would no longer be jealous. And I
Uh-huh.
had to start thinking about jealousy as an emotion like anything else. Like it will rise again. And that's okay. It's like, what do I need to do to help myself feel better in that moment? Um, that's the job for me now versus I got to get rid of it. I got to not be jealous.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a comment from Marie earlier saying jealousy usually linked to missing out or some area of my life I haven't been brave in, which made me think of what we were talking about when I was talking about initiating conversations. But also, it's
Mm,
so interesting to me, people's reactions when I tell them what I'm doing this year.
mm.
It's really interesting. There's the reaction when I say, oh, I went to New York for a couple of months, then I went to Crete, now I'm in Bournemouth, then it's London, then it's India, blah, blah, blah. And there are people who will go, they'll just say it. They'll just go like, I'm so jealous. That sounds incredible. That's amazing. Like this, that, and the other. And then you'll get people that have a much more muted response. That they just kind of don't really react. And then you'll get the people that are just like, that sounds terrible. Like that
Oh,
just sounds
really?
like oh yeah. I had a friend of mine going like, that just sounds awful. And I said, everyone seems to think I should be feeling on top of the world all the time. She's like, no. She's like, you never get settled. You're always thinking that. And like, she started naming all these things, and I was like, yeah, actually, I do.
Mm,
I do struggle with those things. But it was interesting when I announced that I was going to go to India to do yoga and that Becca, who helps out with the podcast, was coming as well.
yeah.
Do
Oh,
you
yeah.
remember your reaction to that?
I said I'm jealous.
Yeah. And then another
Yeah.
friend of mine, who's also a mutual friend of mine and Becca's, and I told her, she was like, no, 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 you two can't go without. There's something about
Yeah.
being left
It's
out. And I think
FOMO.
that was also the similar thing kind of with you, with the three of us in the podcast. It's like us two going off and having this
No.
whole thing. No,
Actually,
it
this
was
is
something else.
interesting. So this is a great example. Like when you told me you guys were doing that, first of all, I love to travel. Like this is right up my alley on a personal level. Like if I was an independent being without a family, this is what I would be doing. I want to do this. And when you told me it, I literally felt like when I feel that envy about this, I feel like a string from India to my heart is being just like pulled across the globe like that it's like a longing. But I don't have FOMO much. I don't know why. Like I just not that I'm mad about it, but I don't have FOMO. There is a little bit of like, well, you guys are gonna bond and I'll miss out on that bond, but it's not but it's okay. Like I don't know. Maybe it's like I trust my relationships enough that I don't feel that. I just feel the longing for the thing, not a missing out. There's a subtle difference. I feel like I want this thing, but I don't feel like without it I'm somehow less than.
So you trust that Becca and I are not going to go off and do our own podcast after this?
I do.
And I'll be
And
like,
if you do, I also trust that I'll survive. Like I mean, I know you're joking, but like I'm saying in a worst case scenario where like, or if I were abandoned, because by the way, studies also show that people who are prone to jealousy have more of a fear of abandonment. And if I were to feel that abandonment or something like that, I also have much more faith in myself that I would get back up again.
Mhm.
So that is helpful too, because if at one time in my life I absolutely did not, and it was like, no, it was threatening to not be there. You know what I mean? I could hear in my brain now how that would feel like it would be threatening. Like I need to be there too. You know what I mean? Just to secure myself, to secure my spot in this group. But I don't feel that way. I just
Mm.
really wish I could go. I think I'd love it. And I think we'd have fun, but it's not appealing to my sense of scarcity.
Mhm. Well, another friend of mine, when I told her, she was so excited for me. And I watched her reaction. I was like, this is so lovely. It was
Yeah.
just the best reaction ever. And a couple of days later, I shared it with her that I thought that was just the best reaction ever. To me, those are just the best people in the world. The people that get really excited for you.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm judging myself because I'm going, do I do that enough for other people? I don't think I do that enough for other people. I'm not getting excited enough for other people. And I'm jealous of other people that get excited for other people because that's not me. In the same way, I can be pleased for other people, but that level of excitement, almost like it's happening to them,
Yeah.
I love that.
But it's important you're talking about this because jealousy can be used to point something out to you that you'd like to work on or like that you would like for yourself. You know what I mean? So again, it comes back to that like, do I have capacity for this thing? And is that part of the jealousy? And it's kind of like what you find that you're jealous of how might you cultivate something? Like, how might you use it in an empowered way
Well, you could go on
rather
a diet, right? If you're jealous of someone's than, thin body, you're telling people to go on diets. Is that
oh,
what you're saying,
you
Steph?
twisted it. No, but you could be like, all right, let me think how you would, I'm thinking of in every other scenario except for this one. So if you've got a smaller body and you feel jealous of the smaller body, for me, part of what I'm jealous of when someone's in a body like that is their ability to just like show up and be totally comfortable with themselves. Now, it's related to the fact that when there's a thin privilege, it's easier to be confident with the oneself. But there's something about the energy they carry because of that privilege that's part of the envy. So, or the jealousy. So there might be a like, you know what? I can't change my body genetic code, but I can work on trying to like get more of that energy about me where I walk in a room and I feel like I can be there and you're going to say something.
I've got a question. Did you feel that energy when you were in a smaller body? Is that how you felt?
No. It was a spin on it. Like I felt more there was something of it, but not the energy. It was more like a belief. Like
Yeah.
I felt like I had a right to be there or like I wasn't embarrassed of my body, but I didn't have an energy of
Mhm.
comfort for sure. But it shows you like when you're jealous of this thing, what you're projecting that you're and then what that's telling you about what your values are and then how do we address those in an empowered way instead of a she has this, I don't have this. I'm the worst. I'm going to go crawl in a hole. You know what I mean? Maybe you do crawl in a hole for a little while. Again, I don't want to invalidate the feelings of like, it's not fair. I need to throw a temper tantrum. But like, then what? And to use it so that it doesn't start to like become you.
Yeah. It's for me, it's like it's pulling apart the projection. There's the energy of the emotion. We can allow that. The validation of the emotion and what's just that there's something tender in us that's being poked, right? Because it hurts. It's just an uncomfortable feeling. And it's so disconnecting as well. And I've
Yeah.
often found that if I'm envious of something that someone has, it's like, what is it that, and this is kind of, I think I'm just about to say what you just said in different words, but it's like, what am I expecting that if I had that thing, it would give me?
Yeah.
And it normally then comes down to like a value that I think that's the path to it. Anyone envying a smaller body and going like, that's the way that I can be comfortable and show up and feel like I belong. Feeling comfortable in our own skin and wanting to show up and feeling like we belong, those can be part of a value system, but that's not the path to it usually.
Yeah. Agree. And I think the one place where there is like a just an unfortunate truth is around body size, around like there is a reality that that smaller bodies have a perception by others in many cases of being a certain way. Like those projections aren't just ours; they're for other people too. And I think there's this jealousy sometimes of that person can walk in a room and other people will automatically think she's X, Y, and Z just because of her body, or she'll just have more power, or she'll have more prestige. And that's true a lot of times. Like there is like a base truth of like the way our social world has been built, but it's just preliminary. Like, I feel like, yes, that gets you in a door. Again, it's this privilege thing that just is true. But I think that there's more to it. It's like it doesn't stop there. I know many people who aren't in socially desirable bodies who end up owning the room. You know, I think it's just the body can be that immediate, non effortful way to just automatically have this level of acceptance from others. And yeah, that's an unfortunate truth. All right, Melissa says, I most definitely did feel much more comfortable in my small body. I didn't care how my clothes hung on me. I didn't always feel I needed to fix myself.
Yeah. I think there's this whole rhetoric, isn't there, around, well, you can get into a smaller body, but it won't make you any happier and this, that, yeah. And some people are going, well, no, I did feel a lot
Mhm.
better when I was in a smaller body. There's a certain reality around certain things that were easier.
There's usually cofactors too. So like it just the body that made us feel like that? And maybe. But sometimes it's also like at that time in my life, I had a good social support system. I was happy in my work. Like, there were lots of things that were happening at that time alongside of the smaller body that contributed to a certain feeling versus, that it's not necessarily just that thing. Like what were the cofactors?
Yeah, that's an important point. Also, did it really change how you felt about yourself at your core? Because what happens is, yes, I feel a bit better, everything's so much easier, but now I have to cling to this smaller body because this is the only gateway into something. So it can create this sort of clasping, kind of contracted way of showing up, particularly around food, right? If there's fear of going back into being a bigger body, does it really fundamentally change how you see yourself at the core level?
Right.
Discuss later in your own time with your family.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Any wise words to round this all off nicely, Stephanie?
Don't be jealous. No, I'm just kidding. Be jealous and name it.
Yeah. And then realize it's all projection, and then get on with your life.
And don't forget to come visit us in Dublin in September. The link to those tickets are in show notes.